Cheers. Cheers. Exactly. Yes. I'm Amy Sharma. I'm the executive director of Science for Georgia. So not I'm walking myself on. It's thank you all very much for being here at Georgia Science Junction. Um, Thanks for being part of our name change. It's always exciting. Very part of this is that we're now in fun places like Tucker, Georgia, because it's always good to expand out and try new things. Um, if you haven't already, you should join our Catalyzer network, and then you can do fun things like learn about this, but volunteer at events and come to our community organizing events and things like that. And more importantly, we appreciate the dog just walked in and now no one cares what I'm saying. But anyways, yes, this would not be possible without you all being here. So we really appreciate your support of Science for Georgia. Thank you so much. Huge thank you to HighCard for making this possible. If you haven't been to HighCard in Tucker, Georgia, you should come visit because this is cool. They have yoga on Saturdays and it's very festive in here. I like the lighting. Finally, our call for speakers is open for our annual Environmental Justice and Climate Protection Conference. We need you to be speakers. Tell your friends, sign up to be a speaker. We would love to have you. Okay. All right, so let's get started. We're talking about advocacy, especially, and we're drinking. Okay. All right, that's me. I am the executive director of Science for Georgia. Before I was here, I have a PhD in biomedical engineering from Duke. After that, I went and worked in DC as a policy fellow at the National Science Foundation. After that, I was at Georgia Tech Research Institute for a couple years. I did a lot in big data there, and then I was at some startups before I came to Science for Georgia, which is the coolest job I've had. Not saying that because the founder's sitting here or anything. So quick introduction to what we do here at Science for Georgia. We do three things. Well, we were started in 2018 because we wanted to build a grassroots effort of climate and science-friendly people doing the right thing. Because of that, we are trying to improve communication among scientists and the public, so we go out and we teach scientist communication training. We increase public engagement with science by doing things like this, coming to bars, having chats, doing cool things like this. We do science comedy. Our science comedy tickets just went on sale, or they will in like an hour, so very excited about that. And then finally, we advocate for the responsible use of science in public policy. So that's the other reason we're here tonight, is to talk a lot about how we can make change happen with the local legislator. All right, so we're going to learn about the policy making process. So this is Paige. Paige was an intern with us in 2021. And she came to us and she's like, guys, we really got to fix COVID learning loss. And I was like, I don't want to go anywhere near the school system. There's so much feelings and drama when it comes to education. And but she was like, I'm sorry, there's actually a ton of evidence-based best practices about how to kids to read, and we're not following any of them ever made, because oh my god, education, right? So the thing about education is that every one of us has been to school, and so when you talk to someone about education, they all think they know how to do it because they all went to school, right? And so many feelings, so many, a lot easier because it was like, let's look into this, let's study it some more. That passed mainly because a Georgia football player who won the Super Bowl got involved. I want to say it was me, but really it was the guy wandering around with the Super Bowl ring. Like everyone during that hearing when he was speaking, like it was take your kid to work day. Like all the legislators had their kids with them because they're like, you can meet a Georgia football player. No one cared that he played for the Patriots. But finally, because of all that, in 2023, they did pass 2 pieces of legislation about literacy, right? So it happened. We made this happen. Woo! Yay! Okay, so beer seems like a lot easier, right? Like, we all just have positive, happy feelings about beer. I do. So, yeah. But, so before we get there, how does the government work? Okay. So, quick and dirty, how does the government work? We should all remember this. You know, the way our democracy is set up is that the federal government is in charge, and then, you know, there's states' rights, and then there's local county rights. The federal government has power over a lot of things, but really impact happens on a very local level, right? Like the things that affect your lives on a regular basis usually happen through local laws. And passes like what they say tax law should be, like what it is. The executive branch sets up the IRS to then go out and collect the taxes and enforce the rules, and then the judicial branch decides if those taxes are constitutionally correct, right? Or if they're within the bounds of the Constitution. All right, so let's talk about Georgia. Georgia, we have the Georgia General Assembly, which is our legislative branch. I can't see that on my screen. So the state Senate is the upper house, and that has 56 districts. And so that means about 192,000 people per district. And then the state house is the lower house, and that has 180 districts and 60,000. Legislative calendar looks like sessions are 2 years, so we are in year 2 of a legislative session. So if things do not pass by April of this year, they are dead, and they have to be resubmitted again in the next legislative session. So in January and February is when things are happening. People are introducing bills. There's committee hearings. There's this thing called crossover day. So February 29th this year, if a bill that is started in the House has not been voted out of the House and made it into the Senate, or if a bill that's started in the Senate has not been voted out and made it into the House, it's effectively dead for the session. So people freak out about crossover day. Policymakers freak out about crossover day. Until I joined Science for Georgia, I didn't even know what crossover day was. That's cool. But then, so crossover happens at the end of February. March is like, as all the crossover bills, you're trying to get them through the other house and passed, and they start just slamming bills on other bills, and oh my god, it's a disaster, right? But that's March. And then March 28th this year is sine die, which is the end of the session. So that's when they gavel out for the session. Regardless of what year it is, the General Assembly always adjourns in time for the masters. So if you ever want to schedule, right, because they have to go to the masters. So every year they're always like, oh, we're going to extend the session. And never in a million years, that's when they're open to new ideas. It takes a bit to find them because, you know, they're working, but it's a little bit. Whereas if you're contacting your legislator between January and March, it better be about a bill that is alive and viable in the House or the Senate, or they're like, if I don't have a bill number, I can't help you, right? Like that's kind of is there a bill number? Is this a rough concept? And if it's still a rough concept, forget about it until the off season. So let's go through that. All right, so cool. So you have a problem. So we'll take the example right now of local breweries are getting a little hammered by some weird regulations where they're not allowed to distribute without going through a middleman. There you go. So this is our step to passing a bill about that, right? So this is real. So step 1, identify your problem. They're already set on that. They know what the problem, right? But if you don't know what your problem is and you're like, we should do something about it, but we need a little bit more, like it's very succinct. Local breweries having trouble distributing their beer to customers. That's like very succinct, right? So if you have a problem, think about what is your problem. Get together with your small group of friends who also have this problem And then think about, why is it a problem? Who cares about it other than me and the 5 of us sitting at this bar? And is there a solution? And then from that, think, what do you want people to know about your problem? If you were explaining your paragraph to your, I always pick on my mom, because I explain a lot of things to my mom. She's a great lady, but like if I was going to explain this problem that I had to my mom, how would I do it in 2 paragraphs? How would I do it in only 3 sentences? What if it was like a really long day and I only had 1 sentence to talk to her, or only 5 words, right? And then that's it, right? Your 5-word, and this is your, as you're going through and you're like, we're going to solve this problem, we need to fix our distribution, we need to have 5 words about this, only 5 words. And so whenever you're talking to someone or you're framing a message, that's what you want to talk about, are your 5 words. Great. So cool. That was fun. You and your 10 friends at a bar, you formed a little group and you came up with your 5-sentence or 5-word problem and you're ready to go, right? But we just talked about the General Assembly, right? Like there's 10 million people in Georgia. your local representative has 60,000 constituents at least, right? So how are you not Waldo? Who in here knows who Waldo is? Okay, thank God. All right, so the young people over here, Waldo was a fun children's book when we were growing up, where you had to find Waldo in the sea of people. Anyways, it's going to get worse with the 80s references. I'm so sorry. So what you want to do is you want to grow, because you need to form a posse, right? Like you need to form a big group of people, so that way when you go to the legislator and you want to get something done, you have people behind you, right? You need voters, thousands of voters, because your representative cares very deeply about being reelected. So if they think that this is going to make their constituents happy, that sounds good to them, right? So you want to build from your core to like a committed group of people, right? To then a crowd of people, to then the general public, right? And so how do you get people, like, how do you get people to care about the fact that local breweries are having trouble selling their product, right? Like, why is this a problem? How you have to step outside yourself, right? Like, it is a problem for you for this reason, but why does it matter to anybody else you're talking to that is not a brewer trying to run a business? Like, why does it matter to them at all? And so then you have to think real hard about that. So, but it's helpful because there are ways to make people very sympathetic to your cause, because we all think about a lot of the same things, right? So our good friend Maslow came up with Maslow's hierarchies of needs. So this is simple. If you can relate your problem to a basic need, everybody has basic needs, right? Like we all need to pay the rent, we all need to buy food, we need food and shelter and health and safety and all of those things, right? So if you go to someone and you're like, I'm having trouble running my business, I might lose my job, I might put these other 5 people out of work, people they notice, right? They're like, oh, that would suck if I lost my job, I wouldn't be able to pay the rent, right? So like anything, people can then start to sympathize with your situation. You can move psychological needs around, like lovingness and belonging needs and all of those things. But I don't know. In 2023, most of us are still kind of at the bottom of the pyramid. And then at the very top of the pyramid is self-fulfillment needs. I'm really tired, guys. I don't think I'm going to be self-fulfilled this year. So, like, if your bill has to do with self-fulfillment, like achieving zen and inner peace, no one cares. Like, I'm really sorry. I don't even care, right? I'm tired, right? I'm trying to run a business. We're all trying to make the rent. So make sure that what you're doing appeals to basic needs. Right? And so our good friends who wrote the U.S. Constitution had to be ratified by the people. So they did a huge sell job. So any of us who had to memorize the preamble in school, the preamble is a marketing statement, right? That's all it is. It's totally a marketing statement, right? Like they knew it, right? And they went to we the people in order to establish justice. that sounds important. We all need justice. We all need to ensure domestic tranquility, which I think is a fancy way of saying like peace. Provide for the common defense, right? You had just fought a war with Britain, so safety is probably still pretty high on everyone's list. Promote the general welfare also sounds really important. I would like that, some of that too. And secure the blessings of liberty, right? We fought this whole revolution because we felt that our rights were being ignored, right? So huge sell job. Good thing about this, hasn't really changed. If you can relate something to basic needs, the economy, education, safety and security, freedom and justice, or the environment, you can probably get someone to listen to what you have to say. These are like a magical set of things, right? So let's talk about beer again. So the current law in the state of Georgia is that small breweries have to sell to wholesalers who then sell to retailers. Why is this a problem? Can anyone think of why this is the interactive part of the thing? You in the back. It makes good beer expensive. I love it. Yes. Yes, it eats the profit of the small breweries, exactly, which is bad. Anything else? Yes. Right, so your product is not, you are not in control of where your product is going. So because the brewer is stuck selling to the wholesaler, what if the wholesaler decides not to feature their product, or they're angry at you, or whatever, or they have a crappy marketing team, like you are off the thing, right? So that is a problem. So how does the current law affect someone? Pick any of those words in the orange box. Economy. Sounds good. All right, cool. So how should we fix it, right? So good job. Some of the brewers got together and they already figured out how they came up with a proposed law where breweries could just sell it to people themselves, right? And there's a lot more going into this law about how that they can also enter into agreements with other local breweries, but simple thing, we can sell it to people ourselves. And then how does this proposed law help the economy? Yes! Tourism! Ooh, that's a good one. Because for sure when I go to a new city, I look up the local breweries. So if there aren't any local breweries, I'm pissed. Anything else? It also affects the economy because jobs, right? Because this is putting local breweries out of business. Yes? Oh God, I am going to repeat that for our vacation so teachers can have a drink at the end of the day, which God bless them. After running summer camps, do you know what I did after I was like, teachers, how are they still alive? Like, I would just go drinking after that. So totally it helps them, but more importantly, jobs, right? Jobs. Super, like, this is bread and butter for the Georgia General Assembly, right? Because this can be related to local jobs. You're supporting small businesses and the local economy, and then if people keep their local breweries open, they get more tourism dollars, right? Everyone's trying to revitalize their downtowns with like fun breweries in cool places like this, right? So they're pretty set. So then your next step is, cool, you figured out your problem. Great, you need to go out and get a bunch of people to help you out. So you have to tell them two things. You can come up to them and you can be like, I need you to help me, advocate for our local breweries, right? But you have to give them both a thing to do and a way to do it, right? So I'll give you a couple examples here that we always, like if I want people trained in communications, I want to get NIH to make it part of their funding. If I want to save breweries, I want to allow local distribution. Boom, thing to do, way to do it. Understand why quokkas eat lettuce? Support research into basic science, right? Like if you want to solve a question, There you go. I was trying to think of a science question. I love quokkas. Uh, so then, right, so then you've got your core, you've got your committed group, you need to really get this out. You need an elevator pitch about your problem, right? So you want a 30-second elevator pitch so that way, this is you're there, you're a local brewer, you want to save your local breweries, you just need other people to care about this, right? So you need to tell them what the problem is, how it's affecting something that they could sympathize with, what your current solution is, and then you need to end your statement with, will you help us support saving local breweries by calling your local legislator, right? Like you need to end your 30-second business pitch should always end with like, will you help me do this by doing this action? So, and then if they're like, cool, how do I call my legislator? You're like, I can tell you how to do that. All right, so you're connecting with lawmakers. So we're going to go a little back to the basics. Why on earth should you talk to your lawmaker? Like, why, right? Like, they're fancy. They're hanging out in the Gold Dome. There's a lot of marble staircases and fancy parties and attending the Masters. So we just saw that compressed legislative session. In 3 months, these guys have to pass a budget because they're legally required to pass a budget and pass any bills that they feel like passing in 3 months. So that means on any given day, they're thinking about tens, if not hundreds, of different pieces of legislation. They don't know what's going on. Not through any fault of their own can you keep 100 different issues in your head in one day. No, right? Like, so when you call them excited about this issue and I would like you to vote yes or no on this bill, they assume that you're representing the views of many registered voters. So they're like, cool, my constituents are reaching out to me about this issue. It actually matters to them, right? So when you reach out to them, tell them a story. Because again, stories a lot more than they remember facts. So if you're calling your local legislator or you're talking to your friend on the street, please start with a story, because then they're going to remember the story. And I think we can all safely say that no one cares about facts in today's world. So if you have your 30-second elevator pitch, phone call, email, sorry, I gotta actually read this. Who are you, right? So first things first, if you're talking to a legislator, please introduce yourself. People are, swatting local legislators on a regular basis. Please tell them who you are and that you are a human being with a pulse that lives in their district. And then make it sad. My business is struggling because state regulations force me to use a middleman. I can't pay my employees, right? Like, lay it on thick. Why is this bad, right? Tell a story about how you started a brewery because, I don't know, it's a little late in the day, but it was your lifelong dream, and if you don't do this, you can't send your kid to college, right? I don't know. In the past 3 years, blah, 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 breweries have failed in Georgia. That is a true statement. And then these small businesses are a vital part of our local economy. Hit them hard with those buzzwords. And then be like, I have a solution for you. Eliminate the middleman and allow us to distribute, right? That is a great phone call to your legislator. That is a great email to your legislator, right? So anytime you have an issue that you want people to understand, start this kind of like who you are, what the situation is, how it's relevant to them, how many people it affects. You really want to get, especially with legislators, how many people it affects, right? If it just affects you and your best friend, they might not care. But if it affects a bunch of local businesses, they're going to care. And then definitely tell them how to fix it, right? Because their next question after this is like, cool, give me that bill number, what do I do, right? So if you want to find your legislator, there's like 10 apps to do it on the internet. Here's a QR code for you. For sure, when you're reaching out to legislators, you've connected with lawmakers. How do you write a bill? Don't write your own bill. Just don't do it. If you have a problem, right, that's when you get together with your legislator and they draft the bill, or there's a lot of local lawyers and like groups that can help you, right? Like Science for Georgia can help you find some people to write a bill. Don't do it yourself. It's an ugly process. But for sure, reach out and get help. So you get your bill. Now you're going to pass that bill, right? We're ready. Let's get it done. So cool. Now you need to whip up a lot of excitement, right? Again, we don't just need 2 phone calls. We need like 400, right? So to get it done, right, like your core group of like 10 people that care very much about this, they don't need any assistance. They're like, cool, I'm going to go call my legislator. I'm going to make this happen, right? But if you want to get other people to help you with your cause, you want to build a little toolkit for them, right? You want to give them a sample email to send to their legislator. You want to give them a link to how to find their legislator. You want to give them some talking points. Like maybe they're like jazzed to actually call their legislator, right? So you want to give them like, here's 10 talking points, so that way you can have a fun conversation with them. You can make a flyer. Flyers are very helpful. And then your core app, right, I just said please don't reach out to like random stranger legislators. The bills have to pass out of a committee. So if it's in a committee, it's totally cool to write like the 10 committee members and be like, hey, I'm Susie. I care very deeply about Bill. Whatever. I would appreciate you giving it a hearing or passing it, right? Because then you're specifically targeting them because you know they're looking at it, as opposed to just like you're sending some rando automated bot email. All right. So say you're like super jazzed up and you're like, I'm not just going to send an email. I'm going to go to the Capitol. You can go to the Capitol. Everybody can go to the Capitol. It's the people's house. You can go to the Capitol. This blew my mind when I learned this. Anyone off the street can walk into a committee hearing and provide testimony on the bill that is up for hearing. There's like some caveats to that, but for sure, if your bill has a hearing that day, you can go down to the Capitol and show up and put a piece of paper and be like, I'd like to give some remarks. You only get those 2 minutes, so again, use your little canned elevator speech, right? Like that's great. You can also swing by your representative's office and just talk to them. This is where having a flyer or a sticker is very helpful, right? Because if you're down there and you can't get a hold of them, you can at least leave your little flyer with the secretary in their office and be like, hey, I stopped by. Please tell them to vote for this bill, or please tell them to not vote for this bill, or whatever. Also, weird psychology, people are very transactional, so if you give them like a piece of paper, they feel obligated to at least read it, right? Like it's a weird psychological, like transactional, this person gave me a gift. I must acknowledge the gift, even if it's a flyer, right? So that's fine. Don't buy them a steak dinner unless you're like a registered lobbyist or whatever, but a flyer is fine. So how do you do all this on the internets? The Georgia General Assembly website, the front page will show you what committees and what's going on in the House for the next, or in the House and the Senate for the next 3 days, right? So you can go on there and see the schedule for the day. Then you can look up your bill. You can find your bill in the little search bar in the corner there. And once you look up your bill, it shows you who has sponsored your bill, which is awesome, right? You can learn, oh, these 5 guys signed on to it. Great, awesome. And then it shows you where it is. So right now this bill is sitting in the Senate, in the regulated industries, right? So there it is. And so then you can click on regulated industries and you can see who the committee members are, right? And so then you can figure out, cool, I need to get my bill a hearing in this committee. I can contact those 5 people. We don't have time to go into this, but just please be nice. If you contact anyone, remember your manners, right? Like, okay, just basic human decency, respect, kindness, all of the things. Okay, cool. So say you want to just go see your guy, right? Like I picked Chuck here. That's where his office is. But the important person on this page is their assistant. Be super nice to their assistant. If you want a meeting with your guy, write their assistant and be like, hey, I live far away. I would like to talk to my representative or my senator. I'm willing to come to the Capitol. Is there a good time? Their assistant's going to help you get on their calendar, right? That's their job, right? Unless they're a jerk to their assistant, and then you're never going to get on there, right? Like, again, we're back to nice, polite. Your mom raised you to be a good human being. Please be very nice. Right? Because even if you didn't vote for this person, they are now your representative, right? So they serve you, and you should be nice to them. Okay. Other fun things you can do. Host a letter writing party. Legislators love to get handwritten mail because it takes effort to write your feelings on a piece of paper and put a stamp on it. Like, they love it. They think it's so cool. Do a social media campaign. I don't know what to tell you about social media. It's kind of a hot mess these days, but it used to work. And then, get people together. If like 10 of you go to the Capitol at once, well, that's huge. Wear coordinating t-shirts or have your own stickers, right? Like, then people are like, who are those? Like, I've participated in days at the Capitol. I've been at the Capitol when there are like, somebody's having a day and there's a bunch of people in a blue shirt or whatever. After like 3 minutes, you're like, what do the blue shirt people want, right? Like, regardless of if you care about the blue shirt people, you're at least just like, I've seen 100 people in a blue shirt. What's going on, right? So if you all show up and you're like in your little thing and you're like, so then, you're asking people to help you out. So a meaningful call to action is very short and concise, uses an active voice, and it gives people, like, you want people's barrier to entry to be 0. If you want someone to help you have something done, and this is in general, once it's outside like a committed group of 10 people, you have to make it so easy for them to be part of the group, right? You have to be like, here's a sample letter. Here's a stamped envelope, right? I need you to call someone. Here's how you call them. Here's how you find their phone number, right? Like, all of the things. Make it so easy for them that they can't at any point be like, right? Like, I've reached this point where now I have to spend 10 minutes Googling it and I'm out, right? So be, and then get excited, right? Woo! Woo! We're going to save the world. Woo! It's like having a wingman at a bar, right? Like, you can get this done. So we have 2 coming up, so you're welcome to join us for them. But more importantly, we wrote this all down. So you can join, you can click on this delightful QR code or bit.ly, and we wrote down all of the steps in those process. We have tips and tricks for great ways to write a letter, how to find your legislator, all of the things. So you can do it. It was the first time I went down there, it was like the scariest day of my life. And then the next time I was like, yeah, it's cool, right? Also, it really helps because, like, we see politicians on TV and they're like crazy and there's like, but we only see the nut jobs on TV, right? Like, 99% of the people at the Capitol honestly care very deeply about their constituents and not just about being cool on Twitter, right? Like, they actually care very much. And so if a thing that affects you, they want to hear about it. They might not vote for it, but they at least will be polite enough to give you the time of day, right? So they're very unintimidating once you actually talk to them, except for the like 4 wackadoodles that we'll just not talk about. That is my presentation. Drink and be merry. Who has questions? SB 163 is current. It is alive. It is in a committee. So yes, sir. Where in the process is it? As far as I can tell, it is in that committee. So it needs a hearing. Senate committee. So it needs a hearing. Yeah, I believe it got introduced like last session. So I don't know why it did not get out of committee. I don't know. But yes, it is in committee. So step one would be to get it out of a hearing in that committee. Yes. Right, so that means if it's been read and referred, it has been put into a committee and it has not had a hearing. Great question. So we have our legislative session is our 2 years. So this is the second year. So anything that was introduced in 2023 is still alive and viable in 2024. If it doesn't, no action this year, then you got to start all over again next year. So yeah, yes. Like, to what? Oh, right. So no, every state has their own like fun way of doing it, but most states have a General Assembly-esque body, a legislative body. Virginia and like one other only has, maybe it's not Virginia. Minnesota has one house. There we go. Some flyover state. So some of them have just one house. Texas, I think, only meets every other year, right? Like, none of them are as active as the federal government where they're in session all the time, right? Like, most of them have an abbreviated session that meets only for a limited amount of time because most of them do not pay their representatives very much money, so they all have to have other jobs. Sir, yes. Great question. Right, so for those of you who couldn't hear, the question was, why do we think this bill is stuck in, hasn't had a hearing? And the answer is, I have no idea. So I looked this, we tried to do this to help, like, I don't know. But who does know is the person who introduced it. So I'm hoping that the people who worked with that senator to get that bill introduced call that senator and are like, hey, what's the holdup, right? And so wild swag is that it has to do with alcohol, and there are still some people in the state where anytime you bring up drinking, like I heard someone mention marijuana in a hearing and I thought everyone was going to die. Like, it was just, the pearl clutching was just off the rails. So it says alcohol, so I'm guessing I don't know, but that's probably part of it. But also, they have so many bills that maybe just not enough people have kicked up a fuss and asked for a hearing. Sir, named Patrick. Yes. What was my first bill that I went to the Capitol for? Oh, I know. The first ever bill I went and spoke about randomly. There's this thing going on the coast. This is delightful. So marshlands in the state of Georgia are the property of the state of Georgia. The only exception to that is if you have a king's grant, and it is called a king's grant because your family was deeded that land by the King of England when we were still a colony. And so there are some people on the coast who say they have a king's grant and are very upset about how long it takes to prove that they have. All right, so you have documentation from like the 1600s, and in order to claim your king's grant, you have to prove that you've been doing whatever it is was in your grant for the past 400 years and that it has been passed successive. My grandmother joined the Daughters of the American Revolution, and it took her 3 years to prove her lineage, and that was to join like a Tea Party club, right? So like, it takes a while, and so they were trying to pass a bill to be like, if you don't expedite the process to under 3 months, it just automatically defers to the person making the claim, which is ripe for a lot of fraud. So I went down to give remarks on how that was the dumbest thing I had ever heard, but I said it way nicer than that. So, but it was basically like marshland's super important to Georgia, and we need to protect it, and it takes a while because that was the first bill, and I was very nervous. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's why I was laughing. But yeah, okay. Yes, sausage. I don't want to know what goes into that at all. Um, um, I love also that you used football in Alabama. That was good. That was good. Yeah, this state. So for sure, like full disclaimer, this is not Science for Georgia's bill. We just picked it because we love our local breweries that let us come to their bars. Yeah, woo! So I do not know the ins and outs of like why, but for sure, right? Like maybe people are upset because it's got the word alcohol in the name. Maybe people are upset because one of the sponsors, they need one of the sponsors to vote yes on another bill, and until they vote yes on, right, there is an enormous quantity of horse trading that goes on. But I would say for a bill like this, the horse trading seems a lot less, just because it's pretty straightforward, it's cut and dry, it's not very controversial, right? Like the bills that get the horse trading are like the super controversial ones where they're like, we want to plow over an entire national park, right? Like, or like those are like the big ones that are getting a lot of publicity. Those are the ones that get a lot of horse trading around it because they're like, oh, if you don't vote for this bill, you hate all farmers, right? And you're like, oh god, right? So like this one doesn't seem to have that level, but I don't know. I've never talked to the sponsor about the bill, so I don't know. But yeah, for sure, the bigger a bill is and the more complex it is and the more controversial it might be, the more apt that it's becoming a weird football disaster. But we do love our local brewers. Thanks, guys. Woo! Okay. Yes, any other questions as I drink my beet beer? I love a good nerdy question. Okay, I love this question. So we're getting a process questions, right? Because if you look, um, and I'm gonna flub this up a little, but we do have it written down on our website what they all mean. But basically, kind of the general flow is like your bill gets introduced and it gets read, and then it gets assigned to a committee, and then once it's in a committee, it hangs out in the committee, and it has to get a committee hearing because then it gets voted out of committee and then it gets to the floor and then it has to get voted, but before it gets voted out of after it gets voted out of committee and before it has to get on the floor schedule. So this is another place where it can get stuck, right? Because the committee could vote yes on it, and then the committee that's in charge of setting the like voting schedule for the day, if you piss those guys off, they're just never going to put it on the schedule, and it's never going to come up for a full house vote. So that's another fun thing, right? And that's where a lot of horse trading goes on. Where, yeah, for sure. and then it has to get over to the other side. So you know it's crossed over if it's a Senate bill and it's in a House committee, and or vice versa. And you will see it has been assigned to a Senate committee and a House committee. So yeah, we have like we wrote down what they all mean on our website, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but I will get that for you. And if I don't have it on our website, because we've had a lot of website issues lately, let me know and we'll get it back on the website. It did exist on the website at one point in time. Yes. Yeah. Okay, great question. So I'll repeat it because we don't. Man, we forgot our second mic. We'll get there. Do we have whatever? It's too late now. Whatever. We're good. We're drinking. We're fine. So the question was like to get people excited, like the general public excited about getting support behind your issue, right? You have to build empathy and rapport with them, right? Like, please feel sympathetic to my situation because this is affecting my livelihood, or I need you to feel sympathetic to this because if we don't do something about it, your safety is also impacted, or whatever, right? But then you get to the legislator and you're like, do they have the same set of like empathy things, or do we have to then appeal to them, right? And that's interesting, right? So there's a lot of these like the hot button issues, obviously, like if you say safety and security or local economy or jobs, they're probably going to listen because no one in the legislator wants to look like they're anti-jobs. Like, no, right? I mean, there's probably one guy, but like in general, being anti-jobs is not a good look for a legislator, right? So like, there's some that you can really hit them, but then, like other ones you need to look at. If it's in a committee, look at where those committee members are actually located in the state, right? And then you can look at it and you can be like, cool, the head of this committee lives in this region in the state, and I looked at that region in the state, and most of their jobs come from XYZ, right? So I need to, like a big one is, if you're talking to someone and they're in rural Georgia, if you can relate it to farming or natural resources, not just like, but also just like, hey, you have 3 major rivers that run through your district, and fishing is a huge business in the state. Like, people spend a ton of, like, the natural, like, outdoorsman economy in the state is huge, right? So if you're going to a legislator and you know that, like, outdoor recreation is a big deal, if you can be like, this is going to pollute your river and your trout fishers are going to be mad, oh man, they'll listen, right? So like you have to, it's a little bit different, but you just want to kind of look at where they are, right? So all of these ones, right, if you look at these people and you're like, cool, you represent this major city or this small town, you have 3 local breweries on your main street. They're gonna, you could even call one of those local breweries and be like, hey, can you call your guy, right? Like, that's another way to do it. You can also look at, do you have allies in that person's district? Great question. Love it. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, that is totally acceptable, right? So the question was, so if you're like, man, I really care about this bill because it's gonna save the whales, and my entire life is dedicated to saving the whales. I don't know the sponsor. I've never heard of the sponsor. I don't know but if you look up the sponsor and you're like, cool, it's perfectly acceptable to write the sponsor and be like, hey, I don't live in your district, but I care very deeply about bill blah 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 that you are the sponsor of. What can I do to help you, right? And sometimes they're going to be like, just write the head of the committee and tell them to pass it out committee. Or sometimes they're going to be like, cool, I'm working with this group that's doing a lot. You should meet Janie, who's part of the Save the Whale Brigade, and she'll tell you what to do, right? Like, so there's two options. But if you write the sponsor and ask how you can help, they're usually going to be pretty excited, and because they sponsored the bill, they want it to pass. So that is a time when you can write someone that's not your legislator, and it's perfectly acceptable. Yeah. Any other questions? There's no. What am I? I am drinking a beer with, what's it called? It's called Blood Moon, and it's made with beets. No, it's a pink beer. Go Barbie. All right, thanks. Woo! We really appreciate you being here. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm going to turn this off before I get next to the... We're going to do it right this time. I was pressing